Let's start another new region. We're going to talk about South Asia. And of course, this is all of the places we have been. And now we are moving south of Central Asia into South Asia. So we're going to be talking about countries like India, Pakistan, Bhutan, places like that. Okay? So this is the hearth of Hinduism, for example. It's also the hearth of Buddhism. So this is an area that's significantly different, especially culturally, from the rest of Asia. And we're going to talk about why that is, because the physical geography of this area has meant that the culture kind of evolved in isolation because of some barriers. So, yet again, we have a connection between the physical geography and the cultural geography. Okay? So, this is a region that also is full of some really interesting contradictions. This is a place where we have some incredibly ancient civilizations. People have lived here for thousands and thousands of years. This is, for example, is some of the art from Mohenjo-daro, which is one of the civilizations that grew up in the Indus Valley. And the Indus is a river that is in the west. It flows through India and Pakistan today. And this writing system, these are probably addresses, we think, or maybe it's the names of the people who lived in these houses. These are outside of structures. But we unfortunately cannot read this script. That we have never been able to translate it. So we don't actually know what they say, but look at the detail on those animals. Isn't that impressive? And the beard here on this man. So there's some incredibly beautiful art, and they were obviously an extremely well developed civilization, but they disappeared fairly suddenly. We think probably because of environmental change and the loss of water. But unfortunately, we don't know as much as we would like to about the civilizations because we cannot translate their writing. So, on the one hand, we have these very ancient civilizations, and on the other, India has emerged in the last few years as one of the huge focuses of tech and of computer know how and ability. They have an incredibly well educated population in many cases. There's a growing a percentage of the population that is graduating from college. And so there's this very interesting contrast. As I said, this is the hearth of Hinduism. Hinduism is an ethnic religion. We'll talk about that and why it is. But the art is very characteristic and it shows up on the cultural landscape everywhere. Okay? So we'll talk more about that. This is also where Buddhism first emerged. Buddhism actually came out of Hinduism. It was a reaction to the hierarchy, to the stratification that Hinduism carries within it. And so Buddhism emerged as a reaction to Hinduism, and it was gained a lot of prominence in what is now India, and started diffusing to other places. But it is no longer dominant in India. It actually faded away there, but it remained dominant in other places, including Nepal, which is one of the countries that we will talk about in this region. So, this is approximately where Buddhism first emerged in what is now northern India. And then it spread really in all directions from that hearth. And it is still dominant, as we talked about, in Tibet, right, where we had the Tibetan branch of Buddhism that also spread through China, the Korean Peninsula, and Japan. And then it also spread through Southeast Asia, into Indonesia, into Thailand, into Vietnam. So incredibly influential in other parts of Asia now, but it originally emerged in what is now India. We also, however, have even more complexity to the large patterns of religion in this area. We have a huge number of people who are Muslim. In Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are both majority Muslim countries. And then there's also a large minority in India. It's like 174 million people. It's a pretty big number to be talking about a minority, but remember that India's population is very, very large. So Islam did not, of course, emerge here, but it is a very large player. There are some other religions adding further to the complexity of religion in the area, and we'll talk about some of those more when we get to culture. Very briefly, talking about population. As I said, India has a huge population. In fact, this region and India itself is the world's second largest concentration of people. The first is, of course, East Asia, because China has the world's largest population. But India is the second most populous country in the world, and it is increasing faster than China's population is. So there are still more people having more children in India than the number of children being born in China. So while China's population is larger at the moment, India's is increasing faster. And so it will overtake China as the world's most populous country soon. I've heard estimates that go anywhere from like 2025 to 2050. Most people are putting it somewhere around 2030, but soon India will overtake China. And this is also an area where we have a fairly low percentage of the population that lives in cities. Only about 25% of South Asians live in urban areas. Now, this is rare compared to other parts of the world we've talked about, right? In Latin America, in Europe, 75% plus of the population lives in cities. But remember that we're also talking about large populations. So while 75% of people in this area in South Asia may live in rural areas, there are still some very large cities in this region. So overall, though, this is one of the world's least urbanized region, but people are moving to cities pretty rapidly. So this is changing. This is shifting. This is a population pattern that is evolving and changing. And when we look at that population more in detail, we have a fair number of informal settlements. Remember, we talked about those when we were talking about the favelas in Brazil. But we have a pretty stark divide between the wealthy and between the poor. The top 1% of India's population has 3/4, 75% of the country's wealth. That is one of the largest inequities within wealth distribution in the entire world. So just like we saw in Latin America, even more so here, the rich-poor divide is very, very stark throughout this region. Not just in India, but also in Bangladesh, and Pakistan, and Bhutan, in all of these places. Okay. So let's label things. Have your map out. We are going to start over here with countries, but before we do that, let's figure out where we are with the context. Let's see what countries we have labeled or that we're familiar with that are near this area so that you can continue putting the puzzle pieces together, seeing what's next to each other. Iran is over here in the west, okay? And this is Afghanistan, which we talked about in that last region in Central Asia. So there's Afghanistan, and that egg shape right there. China is, of course, all of this. This area right in here, that is Tibet, but all of this is China. Okay? And then there is the very tip of the Arabian Peninsula. This is actually Oman right there. So those are some of the places that we have talked about. That gives you a frame for where we are. The Indian Ocean is pretty much to the south of where we are. So there we've got, that is the largest of the bodies of water. But we also have the Arabian Sea over here on the west. And then we have a more kind of protected body of water. And when we have a more protected body of water kind of there's kind of a curve here, right? It's a little bit more protected and sheltered. We begin to call those bays, which is a protected kind of inlet of a larger body of water. And this is called the Bay of Bengal. And that route, Bengal, that is the same route as Bangladesh, which is the country that is right here. And maybe you've heard of Bengal tigers. That is also part of this area. One of the animals that are found in this area, that route. Right? Okay, so let's label some countries. Okay? So starting over here in the west, we have Pakistan, which is a majority Muslim country. Then we have this rectangular one. It is high in the mountains. That one is Nepal. And you can remember that, that we've got a rectangle here, kind of like the rectangle in the N. Okay? Then we have this small country right here. It sort of looks like a brain if you squint. And that's handy because this one starts with a B as well, and that is Bhutan. Okay, this is a kingdom, and it is high up in the mountains as well. Okay. So we got Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan. Moving south of Bhutan, we have another country that begins with a B. This one sort of looks like a person. Here's his head, there's the arms, and they're like kicking a soccer ball off to the side this way. And that is Bangladesh. So as you are figuring these out and learning these, note that if you start over here with Bangladesh and then move to the west, they are actually in alphabetical order. So Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan. Okay? All right, we've got two other countries to identify here. The other two, we'll start with the smaller one first, is down here at the very southern part of our region. It's kind of this teardropped shape island. It used to be called Ceylon, or Ceylon, depending on how you'd like to pronounce it. This is a place that was famous for tea cultivation, still is. A lot of tea is still grown here. So it used to be called Ceylon. It is now called Sri Lanka. Okay? And it is said with an SH sound. And I know there is no H there, but in this part of the world, SR is said sort of with an H. So it's Sri Lanka. That leaves us the big country, the one that dominates so much in this area in terms of population, in terms of politics, in terms of land. And that, of course, is India. And we tend to think of India as kind of this diamond shape here. But there's also an arm that reaches over to the east that you need to make sure that you are also including in India. Okay? All of this is India, that kind of traditional diamond shape, but also this arm that stretches over to the east. It actually stretches between Nepal and Bhutan, Nepal and Bangladesh, and almost completely surrounds Bangladesh. So make sure that you have this part marked as India as well. There's one more thing we need to label on the map, and that is this area up here in the north. Note that we have a dotted line. So what does that mean? That, of course, means that this border is disputed, and it is not drawn solid because there is disagreement about it. And this area, you can kind of think of it as the hat of India. This area is called Kashmir, and it is one of the most disputed and most dangerous parts of the world. And so we have a dispute here between Pakistan and India. Some people in Kashmir would like to be part of India. Some people would like to be part of Pakistan. Some people would like to be completely independent. But we have a big argument that has been going on since independence between Pakistan and India, and we will talk about that when we talk about geopolitics. The other player is over here, because note we have a bit of a dotted line here. This is territory that is claimed by China. Some of it was given to them by Pakistan, and India disputes it all. So China is also involved in the conflict in Kashmir. Okay, we will stop there, and then in the next part, we will begin talking about the physical geography.